Before the story begins, if you enjoy deep space mysteries, impossible friendships, and humanity quietly terrifying the universe, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments whether you think monsters are born or taught. Now let's begin. The Galactic Council had ended civilizations for less. They sat in a ring of light and levitation, beings of claw, mist, stone, plasma, and thought observing a single projection that refused to remain still. The image jittered, fractured, then stabilized just long enough to make several counselors recoil. Not from distortion, but from recognition. The predator existed in fragments across every databank in the known galaxy. No complete image had ever survived contact. Sensors failed near it. Memory coils corrupted. Recording drones simply vanished. What remained were aftermaths. Empty star systems, alloy moons torn open like fruit, war fleets reduced to frozen shrapnel drifting without radiation signatures, as if something had not merely destroyed them, but silenced them. For 3,000 standard cycles, the Council had agreed on only one universal law. If the predator appeared, all contact was forbidden. No negotiation. No pursuit. No hesitation. Run or die. It has crossed 8 protected regions, spoke High Arbiter Threx, its voice resonating through harmonic translators. 5 of them ceased all signals within minutes. A secondary projection bloomed open. A chart of probabilities bled red. Containment success, 0%. Eradication attempt success, statistically insignificant. Survival odds upon direct encounter, effectively non-existent. Several counselors signaled the ancient posture of collective dread. It does not hunt for sustenance, said the archivist species Ulnara, her tendrils dim with unease. It eliminates, it sterilizes, and then it moves on. Silence fell, the kind only immortals feared. Then a junior observer spoke, voice trembling as if the universe itself leaned in to hear. There is an anomaly. The projection shifted. Not to destruction but to motion, smooth, deliberate, controlled. A small vessel drifted across the display, human-made, atmospheric plating scarred, engines outdated by most galactic standards. A frontier-class civilian ship, flagged for non-combat exploration and light salvage. Its trajectory was unremarkable. What followed it was not. The predator's mass eclipsed the vessel entirely, warping space along its edges. Limbs, or interpretations of limbs, folded and unfolded like shadows learning structure. Energy readings spiked and collapsed in patterns no council science had language for. And yet, the ship remained intact. Correct the projection, snapped one of the WarLD species. Magnify the moment before impact. There was no impact, the observer replied. They magnified anyway. The smaller ship did not accelerate away. It did not fire. It did not attempt to mask its presence or flee into folded space. It continued on course. And the predator followed, matching speed. Impossible, several voices overlapped. The predator did not attack. It did not probe. It did not tear the vessel apart to examine its contents. It maintained distance, close but not aggressive. Like a shadow obeying the movement of a living thing. Identify the species aboard the vessel, Threx ordered. The answer appeared instantly, as if the universe itself had been waiting to say the word. Human. A murmur rippled across the chamber, confusion battling with unease. Humans are insignificant, one counselor stated flatly. No psychic dominance. No pheromonal manipulation. Limited lifespan. Moderate aggression. They are social, Ulnara added slowly. Pack bonding. Emotional persistence. High empathy thresholds. None of which apply to it, Threx cut in. The predator predates behavioral classification. The projection zoomed closer, resolving a visual that made several council members recoil again. This time not in fear but disbelief. The predator adjusted its trajectory when the human ship did. When the vessel passed near a debris field, the predator moved first, positioning itself between the wreckage and the fragile hull. When the human craft powered down briefly for reactor cooling, the predator slowed, orbiting in a protective arc. It was not hunting. It was accompanying. Confirm no mind-altering emissions, Threx said. Confirmed. No command transmissions? None detected. No biological control vector? Negative. A paw stretched thin. What is the human doing? Someone asked. The observer enlarged a final feed, internal ship cam footage, salvaged from a relay buoy the vessel had passed hours earlier. Grainy. Low resolution. A single human male moved through the narrow corridor. Unarmored. Relaxed. Sleeves rolled back, revealing scarred forearms. His expression was not triumphant, nor terrified. It was tired. Calm. Almost familiar. He paused near a viewport, gazing out into the dark where the predator's silhouette drifted like a living night sky. The human raised a hand, not in greeting, not in command. Just acknowledgement. The predator did not respond with light or sound. But its motion altered, infinitesimally, adjusting to remain within the human's line of sight. The chamber fell silent. This observation ends now, High Arbiter Threx declared at last, voice edged with something dangerously close to uncertainty. Classify the predator as a universal threat at maximum priority. All fleets are to stand ready. And the human? Ulnara asked. Threx hesitated. Monitor only, the Arbiter answered. If the predator is using it, we will know. No one said the more troubling truth aloud. If it wasn't being used, then something far worse was unfolding. Across the void, unaware of the eyes upon him or the verdict being prepared, the human ship altered course again, toward the distant glow of inhabited space. And the universe's deadliest existence followed him home. Jonah Reed had learned long ago that panic wasted air. That lesson had been burned into him 8 months earlier, drifting in the black with a ruptured suit and a dead calm, when hyperventilation would have finished him faster than the vacuum ever could. He breathed slow now, steady, letting each exhale keep his thoughts aligned as his ship slipped through unremarkable stars with something impossible pacing beside it. He didn't look at the external sensors anymore. Not because he was afraid of what they showed, but because he already knew. The walls of the cockpit seemed thin lately, as if awareness alone could make them transparent. He could feel it out there, not in his mind, not as a presence pressing in, but like the knowledge of a storm you don't need to see to understand. It had been 3 days since the predator chose him. The word tasted absurd even in his head. Chose implied intent, decision, cognition that lined up neatly with human logic. But nothing about the thing beyond his hull complied with expectation. The encounter had occurred at the edge of an abandoned refinery halo, the kind of place Jonah frequented for scrap no one else wanted to risk court-martials over. His scanners had screamed moments before reality itself seemed to bend, and then it was there, blotting out stars with a mass that shouldn't have been able to exist in one place without collapsing inward. He had frozen. Most beings did, according to the scattered accounts he later forced himself to read. The predator did not kill him then. It did not do anything really. It orbited once. Adjusted position. Waited. When Jonah's ship had drifted from thruster imbalance, the thing corrected its own motion to mirror his trajectory. That was the moment terror had crystallized into something heavier. Predators didn't mirror prey. They anticipated, they intercepted, they ended. Mirroring meant observation. Study. Jonah swallowed and forced his grip to relax on the console. The ship hummed under his touch, familiar and stubbornly real. He had whispered then, not into the calm, not as a hail or plea. Okay, he'd said aloud to no one. I'm not going anywhere. The memory made him almost laugh now, a dry iron sound in his throat that went nowhere. But the statement had been true. He had nowhere to run, and running would have changed nothing. So he stayed. He powered systems normally. He finished stabilizing his ship. And the predator stayed too. Now, days later, Jonah set a kettle into its clip and waited for the vibration that meant the heating coil had engaged. Ritual mattered. Motion mattered. He ate when he was hungry. He slept when exhaustion won. If he treated the thing outside like a bomb, any careless shift might detonate it. If he treated it like weather, present, powerful but not personal, he could keep going. The first time he slept, he woke screaming. By the third time, he didn't wake at all. Something had changed then. Not in the predator, but in the space it allowed. Jonah had drifted toward unconsciousness expecting obliteration and found stillness instead. When he woke hours later, groggy and achingly human, the external display showed the entity closer than before, its vast form curved along his ship's orientation like a mountain settling against a valley. Protective. The word struck him harder than fear had. "Don't," he muttered, now voice low, not meant to carry. The idea scared him more than anything else. Protection implied reaction. Reaction implied preference. Jonah finished his tea and carried it to the viewport. The glass was layered and polarized for radiation shielding, not curiosity, but it did the job. He watched motion that wasn't motion, shifts in gravity wells and shadow lines that suggested limbs only if you squinted the right way. He raised a hand again, delivering the same nothing gesture he always did before moving away. When he stepped toward the navigation console, the predator drifted too, adjusting without haste. "Yeah," Jonah whispered. "I see you." He could not explain why he wasn't dead. He had stopped trying after the second day. Explanations made things fragile. Acceptance allowed room to breathe. The central conflict pressed in regardless, because he was heading somewhere now. There were limits to solitude, even when solitude was safer than attention. His supplies were finite. His ship needed dock services within 5 days or he'd start losing redundancy. Running cold in open space was an option, but that would strand him indefinitely with a being that might one day decide stillness had taught it enough. So he set his course for home. Not Earth. Not a core world with crowds and patrol grids and orbital traffic so dense it felt like standing in a swarm. Home was a fringe station nestled against a yellow dwarf, half off the maps and mostly ignored. People there knew his name. They didn't ask too many questions when he came back with scrap or scars. The moment he committed the jump vector, the predator reacted. It did not block him. It did not surge forward or flare with hostility. Instead, it adjusted faster than it ever had before, closing the distance to his hull until Jonah's instruments protested with anxious alarms. He held steady, heart hammering as he spoke without knowing why. "I'm going back," he said. "You don't have to come." The predator slowed. Then it matched his heading exactly. Jonah leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Whatever this thing was, whatever cosmic verdict it represented, it had made a decision that centered him within it. The universe had seen fit to place a line of trust where annihilation should have been. As his ship slipped into jump and the stars stretched into burning threads, Jonah wondered, not for the first time, whether the only reason he was still alive was because the predator didn't want to be alone anymore. The council did not sleep while the human traveled. Jonah Reed's ship crossed monitored corridors under silent observation, its outdated transponder pinging through layers of sensors never meant to track something that rewrote physics by proximity alone. Behind him, the predator slipped through real space as if gravity were a courtesy rather than a law. Across the galactic network, calculation after calculation collapsed into contradiction. War fleets mobilized and then stalled. Every species represented in the council chamber understood the same truth. If the predator decided to act, there would be no second chance. The debate was not whether to fire, but whether death would arrive before the firing sequence completed. "Maintain distance," High Arbiter Threx commanded, though no fleet dared draw close enough for distance to matter. "All weapons live but restricted. Any discharge requires full consensus." "Consensus will come too late," growled the Warcast delegate Corin. "Every moment we hesitate, we grant it advantage." Ulnara's bioluminescent tendrils pulsed faintly. "It has not demonstrated aggression. It has demonstrated extinction," Corin snapped. "This is camouflage." The predator's outline filled the main projection, its scale dwarfing the human vessel at its core. The contrast unsettled even the eldest observers. One object was terror embalmed in legend. The other was barely war-capable, its hull patched and heat-scarred from careless landings and close calls that had never reached council records. "They are linked," Threx said quietly. "Explain how." Data streams sharpened, layering behavioral analysis over Annihilation archives. The predator's movements synchronized to the human's navigation adjustments with impossible precision. Latent energy spiked whenever Jonah's ship underwent stress. Engine fluctuations, micro-collisions with dust fields. then subsided the moment stability returned. It reacts to environmental threat vectors near the human, Alnara said slowly. Not to strategic opportunities. And yet, Threx replied, it dominated an entire armada for drifting too close centuries ago. That armada fired upon it, Alnara said. The human has not. The projection shifted to an interior feed obtained by probabilistic spying methods bordering on the illegal. Jonah sat alone in his cockpit, shoulders slumped, dark circles beneath his eyes. He wasn't issuing commands. He wasn't transmitting. He was reading an old data slate, thumb tracing a chip along its cracked edge. He's exhausted, someone muttered. He should be dead, Corin countered. A minor alarm chimed. The human ship had clipped the edge of an ion filament, a navigational nuisance to most modern craft. To Jonah's battered vessel it was a hazard. The Predator moved instantly. Its mass shifted between the vessel and the filament, distorting the radiation flow until the hazard unraveled into harmless dispersion. No counterstrike followed. No show of dominance. Protection without retaliation. Several counselors stiffened. Behavior correlates with pack sentry instincts, Alnara whispered. Concerns for designated member. That designation is unacceptable, Threx replied, though the conviction in their voice had thinned. A human cannot anchor such an entity. Another corridor passed. Another monitored boundary crossed. Each time the Predator adjusted and shielded. Each time Jonah continued on course, oblivious to the existential referendum unfolding around him. Then the human spoke. The audio signal was weak, picked up only through passive resonance sensors calibrated by desperation. Jonah's voice reached the chamber stripped of intent, nothing more than the sound of someone thinking out loud. Yeah. I know it's ugly space out here. Won't be much longer. Silence overtook the council. No language parsing algorithm could find threat, compulsion, or command in the words. They were not aimed outward. They were not meant to be heard. Emotionally contextual communication, Alnara said, reverent and afraid. Not instruction. Then why did it respond? Corin demanded. Because the Predator repositioned again, falling slightly behind the ship now, covering its exposed rear vector. The human reached an outer security boundary near inhabited systems. Automated warning buoys pulsed, transmitting lawful threats of interception and escalation should unknown entities proceed further. The Predator did not react. Jonah did. He reduced speed. That's far enough, he murmured, rubbing his face. They don't like surprises. He cut thrust and waited. The Predator halted too. The moment shattered every simulation the Council possessed. This was not pursuit. This was not containment failure. This was deference. If the human is the control mechanism, Corin said, voice tight, eliminate the mechanism. Alnara's light flared sharp and bright. No. Observe what removing him would do. Threx closed their eyes, an old gesture from a long-dead species. If he dies, the Arbiter said, we may learn the cost of teaching a god what loss feels like. The fleets held position. Weapons hummed. Predictive engines screamed without answers. Below it all, Jonah Reed sat in a battered ship at the edge of civilization, waiting patiently for clearance that had not yet come. Behind him, the universe's most efficient engine of destruction waited too. And for the first time in recorded history, the Council feared not what the Predator might do, but what it might do if something happened to the human it had chosen to follow. The delay stretched long enough for Jonah Reed to feel it in his bones. He had powered down non-essential systems and coasted at the edge of controlled space, hands resting loosely in his lap as if excessive movement might disturb the fragile peace holding the universe together. The station lay ahead, a modest halo of habitation glowing against the stars' soft burn. Home was close enough now that he could pick out individual traffic vectors, tiny lights moving with unhurried purpose. None of them toward him. Figures, Jonah muttered. Behind him the Predator remained still. Not frozen, not dormant, attentive. Its presence bent the background radiation into patterns Jonah's instruments refused to display properly, but he no longer watched the numbers. He watched the way it positioned itself, careful to keep a clear line of space between his ship and the station. Not advancing. Not retreating. Waiting. Jonah exhaled and pushed himself from the chair. He floated toward the viewport, one hand braced against the frame. "This is where I live," he said quietly. Saying the words aloud felt necessary, like naming constellations so the dark didn't feel endless. "People there. Not many. Good ones." The predator shifted, slow and deliberate. Jonah could not tell if it understood language, but language had never been the point. Meaning traveled through tone, through patience, through the fact that he spoke without fear despite how thin the hull around him truly was. "They won't shoot if you stay back," he continued. He swallowed. "I think they're nervous types." For the first time since their encounter, the predator reoriented without mirroring his ship exactly. It drifted outward, increasing the distance by a margin small in cosmic scale, enormous in intent. Jonah felt something loosen in his chest as realization struck him sideways. It was listening. A burst of calm static crackled to life, cutting the moment clean in half. Jonah winced and turned back toward the console, fingers hovering as if the signal might burn. Civilian vessel designation JRD-417, an automated voice intoned, unusually careful. "You are ordered to hold position. Any deviation will be met with interception." Jonah keyed the channel open. "Understood," he said. "I'm not moving." There was a pause, long and human despite originating from a relay overseen by species that did not think in seconds. "Confirm status of the anomalous entity in proximity to your vessel." Jonah glanced at the viewport again. The predator's vast outline loomed farther back now, just beyond a prescribed defensive perimeter. It did not press forward. It did not object. "He's with me," Jonah said and almost laughed at himself. "But he's not coming any closer." The silence that followed felt heavier than vacuum. Behind the scenes, council members argued themselves hoarse. Projections layered the chamber walls with worst-case scenarios and half-formed theories. None of them explained what unfolded cleanly before their eyes. The predator, bane of civilizations, holding position because a human had asked without demanding. Ulnara leaned forward, tendrils dim with awe. "The human is defining boundaries," she whispered. "Not through dominance. Through trust." Corin snarled softly. "Trust is irrelevant. Power answers to power." "And yet," Threx said watching the live feed, "it has answered to restraint." Jonah floated back into his seat and gestured vaguely at the stars. "This is home space," he continued, uncertain why he felt compelled to keep talking. "It's not big or pretty, but it's enough. You don't need to guard it." The predator moved again. It settled, lowering whatever passed for its center of mass, aligning itself parallel to the station's orbital plane rather than Jonah's ship. The shift sent ripples through the council chamber as readings updated in disbelief. "It's choosing a perimeter," Ulnara breathed. "Not occupation. Protection." Jonah stared. Heat prickled behind his eyes, sharp and unwelcome. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Clearance finally came through, the relay voice stripped of bark and threat. "Civilian vessel JRD-417, you are approved for approach. Maintain current speed. Do not provoke interaction." Jonah snorted. Wasn't planning on it. He eased the thrusters forward. His ship crept ahead, fragile and insignificant against the immensity that had shadowed it across half the void. Habit made him raise a hand once more before turning fully toward the station. He paused. "I'll be back," he said, feeling ridiculous and right all at once. "I just need to dock." The predator did not follow. It remained where it was, vast and terrible and utterly still, marking the boundary Jonah had drawn in nothing but words. Station sensors went wild, then slowly stabilized as the entity refused to cross the invisible line. Deep within the council chamber, understanding settled like gravity. The predator was not awaiting orders. It was waiting for him. And if Jonah crossed that threshold and something took him away, if harm found him inside the very definition of home he had just shared, there was no equation in existence that could predict what the universe's deadliest being would do in response. The question no longer was whether the predator would attack. It was who would survive if it ever chose to defend. Jonah Reed floated into the docking bay, the hiss of seals closing behind him echoing through the small compartment like applause for a performance only he had dared to imagine. Outside, the station's residents moved with quiet purpose, unaware that the universe's deadliest predator lingered just beyond the threshold, silent and immense. Jonah had long since stopped measuring its presence with instruments. He felt it in the vibration of space, the subtle pressure in the radiation fields, the almost imperceptible tug of awareness that told him it was still there. Waiting, watching, respecting. He unstrapped and let gravity, or the artificial imitation of it, claim him. Every motion was careful, habitual, a dance learned from months of coexisting with something that could erase him without hesitation. Yet despite the tension that had haunted his every step, a calm bloomed inside him, stubborn and irreducible. He had survived the impossible before, but never had survival felt like partnership. Not fear, not command, but acknowledgement. The predator had chosen to walk beside him. Behind the walls of the council chamber, deliberations had reached a muted consensus. The projections displayed the station's perimeter, the human vessel, and the hovering anomaly in a sequence that no algorithm could rationalize. Threx, Alnura, and even Corin leaned into the evidence with caution bordering on reverence. The predator had done something none had foreseen. It had obeyed a law not written by power or fear but by restraint, by the quiet insistence of a human life. Jonah moved toward familiar faces, station staff who knew him only as a scrapper and occasional courier. They glanced up, expressions tentative, expecting irritation, maybe damage, maybe disaster. Instead he smiled. Brief, tired, but genuine. "Hey," he said. "All quiet today." And quiet it remained, except for the gentle hum in the void just outside, a reminder that not all forces had the universe's scale in mind when choosing a side. Jonah stepped out onto the observation platform, a place where the stars stretched beyond comprehension. He raised a hand instinctively, and though nothing visible occurred, the vibration of air, space, and awareness told him the predator mirrored the gesture in its own unreadable way. It was not mimicry. It was recognition. The station's minor automated patrols flared briefly, sensing an unusual energy field, then paused. No action followed. The predator did not advance. It did not assert dominance. It did not test for aggression. It simply remained aligned with the boundary Jonah had silently defined, a living sentinel guarding the definition of home. Jonah turned back to the interior, scanning the small crowd of familiar humans. He thought about what he had learned on this journey, the relentless vigilance, the constant balancing of presence and restraint. He realized that this was not merely survival, it was education. Every adjustment of the predator's posture, every hesitation and choice it had made in response to him, had been a lesson in the currency of quiet authority. It had learned to protect not by killing but by choosing. And in the same instant, Jonah understood that humans themselves operated on a principle no species in the council had predicted. Their strength was not always in weapons, not always in fleet numbers or genetic superiority. Sometimes, it was in persistence, in empathy, in the ability to hold presence without seeking dominance. This small human settlement, his tiny vessel, his everyday motions, all of it had taught a predator the limits of restraint, the language of coexistence. The council's observers did not yet grasp the full implications, but their projections hinted at the shift. If the predator followed a human's boundaries rather than orders, then the laws they had spent millennia enforcing required reinterpretation. The single most dangerous species in known history had become the student of the one it had no reason to respect, the one it had no reason to fear, and the one it had chosen to follow anyway. Jonah exhaled, releasing the weight of months of tension. He had navigated threats that would have shattered civilizations, yet he felt something far older and more profound. A connection, fragile and unspoken, stretching across impossible differences. It was quiet but absolute, and it was enough to hold the most lethal being in the galaxy at bay without confrontation. He glanced back at the viewport, where the predator lingered at the edge of human habitation. Its immense form shifted slightly, aligning with Jonah's position once more, neither advancing nor retreating. Protection without coercion. Vigilance without aggression. A balance the council had long deemed impossible. Jonah allowed himself a private smile. "Guess we're okay," he said softly, words meant for no one but himself and the awareness hovering beyond glass and radiation. "We're all right." The universe meanwhile began to recalibrate. Fleet protocols paused, council directives adjusted, simulations restarted, all under the shadow of an unprecedented truth. The Predator had walked with a human home and found meaning beyond destruction. Its classification as a universal threat remained, but with caveats now impossible to ignore. The most feared entity in existence had chosen the authority of quiet trust over the assertion of dominance, and the implications rippled through every mind capable of projection. Jonah turned fully toward the station, toward the lights and faces and the small, stubborn normalcy that had waited for him. For the first time in months he felt the pulse of peace, not a guarantee, not a permanent shield, but an active presence shared. Outside, the Predator remained, a silent testament to the power of restraint, of recognition, and of the unassuming authority of a human who had refused to be defined by fear. And as Jonah stepped toward familiar routines, toward the people who would never comprehend the full scope of what had followed him across the void, he knew that the universe had witnessed something extraordinary. The deadliest creature in existence had learned to walk beside a human, and in doing so, had redefined the meaning of threat, of power, and of home. The council could wait. The fleets could wait. The galaxy could wait. Jonah did not. He had arrived. And for the first time he felt the weight of possibility stretch wide and open, limitless, in the company of a being that had once embodied annihilation. Together they stood at the boundary between legend and home, and neither had reason to move.